Russian generals have realized that the war has reached a dead end, according to media reports. The latest analytical materials published by frontline expert Tatarigami_UA show that the situation within the Russian army and command is rapidly deteriorating. Large-scale drone strikes in the Russian rear have not only caused direct losses but also demoralized senior officers. More and more Russian military officials are recognizing that the war has reached a strategic impasse and that it is being sustained only by Putin's personal stubbornness, according to an analytical report. According to the analyst, Ukraine's long-term campaign of drone strikes deep into Russia has produced noticeable results. This includes not only the destroyed infrastructure, but also a shift in the perception of the war itself within the Russian command. Even officers now acknowledge that the cost of the war no longer corresponds to its results. Now, many Russian generals want the war to stop, but President Putin doesn't want that. That's what's causing a rift between him and the generals. According to Tatarigami, in private communications among dozens of senior officers, including those based in Moscow, the idea is increasingly being voiced. The war is at a stalemate, and its continuation is driven solely by Putin's personal ambitions. This doesn't mean the regime's imminent collapse, but it does signal a shift in sentiment even among loyal sections of society and the army. Moscow is increasing its defense production, but it relies almost entirely on Chinese technology, particularly in drones and autonomous systems. Without Chinese support, the analyst emphasizes, Russia would not be able to maintain its current level of combat operations. Despite official statements about a stable situation, the Russian army is in the throes of a disaster in casualties and discipline. According to analysis, the death toll, killed in action (KIA), missing in action (MIA), and desertion rates remain extremely high. The number of wounded, on the contrary, is declining due to poor evacuation. Many simply don't survive to reach the hospital. The Ukrainian defense is experiencing difficulties in certain areas, particularly Pokrovsk and Kupiansk, where the enemy is attempting to exploit the manpower shortage. However, the analyst emphasizes that the problem is not mobilization, but the low rate of return of troops who have left their units. The enforcement system in Ukraine is not as strict as in Russia. Russia is expected to attempt to resume offensive operations in the south in the fall, and to switch to ground assaults in the winter due to deteriorating weather conditions and the reduced effectiveness of drones. However, the quality of training of new units remains extremely low, approximately 70% complete with minimal training. According to Tatarigami_UA, Russia has found itself in a situation where war has become expensive, senseless, and demoralizing, even for those waging it. Ukrainian strikes and economic pressure are gradually undermining even the military's confidence in victory, while dependence on China is transforming Russia from an empire into a dependent vassal.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended Wednesday U.S. strikes against alleged drug smuggling vessels in the Caribbean Sea and Eastern Pacific Ocean, saying targeted boats are tracked very carefully. "I can assure you that every one of these strikes involves boats and shipments that were tracked from the very beginning," Rubio said before boarding a place to travel to Israel. "From the moment these things were put together, the moment they were coordinated, we know where they're headed. We know what their drop-off points are. We know what organizations they're involved in," he added. According to Associated Press, the comments come after the U.S. military on Wednesday launched its ninth strike against an alleged drug-carrying vessel, killing 3 people in the Eastern Pacific Ocean, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said, expanding the Trump administration's campaign against drug trafficking in South America. It followed another strike Tuesday night, also in the Eastern Pacific, that killed 2 people. Hegseth posted on social media hours earlier. The attacks were departures from the 7 previous U.S. strikes that had targeted vessels in the Caribbean Sea. They bring the death toll to at least 37 from attacks that began last month. Rubio added that there are many boats that the U.S. doesn't strike because they don't meet the criteria to be targeted. The Secretary of State also said that Colombian authorities are pro-American and willing to cooperate with the United States. The only problem in Colombia is a lunatic president. "The guy's a lunatic," he commented. Colombia recently recalled its ambassador to the United States amid an increasingly angry back-and-forth between Trump and Colombian President Gustavo Petro. On Wednesday, President Donald Trump's administration announced new massive sanctions against Russia's oil industry that are aimed at moving Russian President Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table and bringing an end to Moscow's brutal war on Ukraine.
Well, we'd still like to meet with the Russians. We'd still want to, and I think I had a good call with Foreign Minister Lavrov, and we'll follow up on that. We're always going to be interested in engaging if there's an opportunity to achieve peace. I think the president has said repeatedly for a number of months now that at some point he will have to do something if we don't make progress on the peace deal. Today was the day he decided to do something. Well, I mean, look, this is an operation against narco-terrorists, as the Department of War characterizes them, the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere. These are well-funded, dangerous, violent drug cartels that operate as terrorists who are flooding our country with drugs. The United States is going to deal with it. The president's made a decision to deal with it. So they come on boats, as we've seen. They come through the Caribbean with the full assistance and cooperation of the illegitimate government of Venezuela, the Cartel de los Soles, which is run by Nicolas Maduro. And they also operate in the Pacific. I think the difference between the Pacific and Venezuela is we have partners in the Pacific. And the challenge with the Caribbean basin is you have a narco state in Venezuela run by a cartel. And I remind everybody, Nicolas Maduro, it's not just me saying it. People think I'm just calling the guy names. He's indicted by the Southern District of New York. The Southern District of New York indicted Nicolas Maduro and a bunch of other people in his regime for being they're a transshipment organization.
If you have allies, then why do you need to strike a boat and kill
Well, the United States has unique capabilities that others don't have. I'm not going to get into the details of the intelligence that we gather, but I can assure you that every one of these strikes involves boats and shipments that were tracked from the very beginning. From the moment these things were put together, the moment they were coordinated, we know where they're headed, we know what their drop-off points are, we know what organizations they're involved in. These things are tracked very carefully. There are hundreds of boats out there every single day, and there are many strikes that we walk away from and that the Department of War walks away from because it didn't meet the criteria. The Colombian authorities, when it comes to like their military and their police, are still very pro-American. The only problem in Colombia is a lunatic president. The guy's a lunatic. He's a lunatic, and he's not well. And everybody knows he's very unpopular in Colombia. Thank you.